there is, something about striving that's important, and but also fundamentally learning that the sacred and the divine do exist, and whether that's a learning, whether that's a cognitive response, like an idea, like whatever it takes for people, particularly the adults and the elders of the village, to embody that and first experience that and connect to that and return to that Hello, this is Mark A. Lewis. This is the Sacred Village podcast. In this very first episode, I'm going to share a little about myself, give you, the listener, a glimpse into what I hold dear: family, community, my spiritual path, cinema, and a desire to communicate and ultimately to connect, and why the concept of the sacred village is ideal thematically for me as a tether, the perfect place to return to no matter where in the cosmos the dialogue goes. So sit back, relax, pour a cup of tea if you can, and enjoy. I have always had a need to communicate, to express myself. For as long as I can remember, I've made films for years in my 20s and 30s and 40s. I'm 50 now. 40s, not so much. Just actually a little dabbling, chipping away at things, because when I was 40 years old, I fell onto a very different path. I had my whole soul and mind and body, all of the things opened like a machete to a coconut when I did ayahuasca for the first time. So I'm, I've stuck with it. I've really been drawn to that medicine. So there's going to be a certain orientation, a certain discourse that will tie back to Indigenous teachings. Spirituality through the lens of the Shipibo, through my own lens of growth on a cellular level, but also on a spiritual level, on a soul level of finding something deeper. But yeah, going back to that communication piece, the expression of. See, okay, so this is where, for me, things get a little bit, they get challenging in a good way, because what I'm wanting to express is ultimately, there's a book by Northrop Frye. I can't remember what it's called. I'll put it in the text. I never read it. A friend, his name's John Callender, and I'm going to have him as a guest sometime. Very fascinating guy, but he recommended it. And what he specifically said, you're not going to read it. I know you're not going to read it, so I want you to read the last 2 pages. And in those last 2 pages, I remember, were so succinct. And it was summing up his book, and I'm sure the book is brilliant. But the phrase that stuck with me was the expression to communicate the incommunicable. And I've used that a lot in my life since picking that up. Thank you, Northrop Frye, a Canadian theologian and academic. I know of him, but I know nothing about him. But the book was about the Bible, by the way. So the book was about finding that divide between the literal, interpretation of the Bible and this poetic aspect, and that space in between, which is ultimately beyond text, right? Beyond the literal, and into this space of being ultimately incommunicable, but with the attempt to convey or to express something that is intangible, that we can't quite put together with our English language. The fallibility of the English language is also very interesting to me, and despite that, despite knowing that, despite getting hung up on words on a regular basis, and in my attempts to communicate, it's what we have, and it's also very beautiful. And there are other languages that allow for different types of expression, and certain languages allow for poetry in ways that others don't. And then there's the language of cinema. And so, yeah, I spent, I guess, 25 years very focused on cinema as my way of communicating. This was my way of expressing myself, and it began when I was young, when I was in high school with the Sony Handycam, like the old yellow water resistant, I think circa 1989, somewhere around there, and my brothers and I, we were lucky enough that my parents bought us one, and boy, did we use it, and we told stories, and it was just, it was actually drama class, grade 9. I missed it in grade 8. It was available, but I took music, and I had to learn that music wasn't my thing, and being a part of a group that way, not my thing. So drama, when I went to that drama class and started to learn, I guess there's learning, but it was about expression and about finding some kind of creative expression. And I grew up with two accountants. My mother and father were both accountants, ostensibly. My dad became an entrepreneur in his late 30s and owned a car dealership, but he was a chartered accountant. That's the degree that he got. And my mother actually got a degree as a school teacher, and she ended up becoming an accountant. But this part of me, there was something there that it lit my brain up, and it's more than my brain, but it was my head, like physiologically, and my body, my heart. That class, it was like Christmas. Every drama class, that's the feeling that I got in my body, was like it was a spiritual experience going to drama class for those early years, and that segued into making longer and longer films, or films that we took more and more seriously. I love cinema. I watched the Academy Awards, so we watched a rerun of it, my partner and I, just a couple of weeks ago, and I didn't feel scrutiny. I didn't feel cynical, and I don't know, somehow I expected myself to feel that way, watching something that is kind of about artifice in a sense, but there's a richness to that, to what's happening there for me, that expression visually, symbolically, so powerful for me. And even seeing some of the imagery, like passing by for Best Picture or cinematography, I'm not sure what it was, and I can't tell you what film it was at the time, but there was this geometry in the set. It might have been Conclave, which I saw, and I really enjoyed that film. But and just as a sidebar, yes, film. I will be referencing films, and there will be conflation with spirituality and this path with the Shipibo and Ayahuasca. And there's like such common ground there for me, and it's very rich, in my feeling world, and it's very meaningful. But anyways, this shot, it just it's like stirs something in my heart, and so that's what we respond to. That's kind of whatever that feeling I had in my heart, like that's that thing that I'm wanting to communicate, and many other variations of that, but that, not the image, but the feeling in my heart connects me to something meaningful. And so that's an important distinction, because we're still in this external world, we're still human beings, we're still doing our experimenting. We don't necessarily always know what's going to resonate in that way and bring us back to that space that holds truth, that, and not truth as in this is true and this is false, like that I would say, something is real or not real, factual or not factual, like those terms have their place. But true, this is an indigenous teaching through the Blackfoot people. But what's true, okay, and this is the kind of thing that I just love. I just love this stuff. I almost want to tell you to fasten your seatbelts for this, and I know it's not going to impact some people in the same way that it impacts me, but perhaps there will be people out there that it will impact. What's true for you, what's true for me, is true for everybody. I'm just going to let that land, and I don't know, for me that it's not graspable. It's not, I can't comprehend it per se, but I just sink into my heart, into my body, and I feel a little closer to something bigger, to the spirit that surrounds us, the spirit, both and, because we're all connected, and we're separate, but we're not separate. So that's that whole paradox. I mean, I love that. The sacred village, no matter what thread, no matter what topic is explored, I want to bring it back and root it in this concept of sacred village, of community. Like it's not real. It's that potential. What's interesting, and oh man, again, this stuff is just so rich for me, but the word for village in Shipibo is Hema, Jema, Hema, and it means village, or city, or like a structure, a community structure. And it, in the medicine world, and I don't know about the common area, the common use of this word, but in the medicine world, it also can refer to an individual. So that individual has a village structure. They have, the different aspects of village, the community aspects are also within. And it even goes beyond that, where there's references in the medicine world to the river Paro, Paro. Paro is river. You can be doing work as a Shipibo curandero. You can be doing work on somebody and using and healing the river, the flow that's going through that individual, the energy that's flowing through that individual, in a way that references the river aspects of that person's being, and the earth aspects, Mai, M-A-I. You can be healing the earth aspects, the sky aspects, Nai, N-A-I. You can be healing these different aspects. Yoda, not to be confused with Star Wars Yoda, but Yoda, Y-O-R-A. That is body, but it's more than body. It's like it's a spiritual, energetic, and physical field of energy, and that doesn't even do it justice. It's just like, all of these aspects combined is the Hema, the Yoda Hema. It's almost synonymous, I've been on that spiritual path very. I don't know what the right word is, because I can mislead with the wrong word, but somewhere in the middle, a very deeply, very connected way, very heartfelt way. Rigid, from the outside, maybe, like I do take it seriously. But part of the reason that I take it seriously is because it's, this medicine, the medicine of the Shipibo and the medicine of the Lakota have have pulled me in very, very deeply. And so, and that's intentional, and that's kind of, I want to honor that. And I get a little bit tentative when I'm speaking about my spirituality, like many of the experiences and the aspects of these traditions are, they're very sacred, and they're meant to be held with so much reverence, because it's the unseen. And it's up to them. And by it, I mean everything. A lot of wisdom in Lakota and other indigenous traditions, the teachings are held fundamentally by the elders and by the medicine man or woman. And the village, not everybody has the exchange, has that communication with the other side. People of the village, they don't necessarily need that. The medicine person has that connection, and the village people can live a regular life. They can be like whatever gets you up in the morning, doing your daily chores and communicating and laughing and, having a cup of tea and spending time with the children, spending time with the elders, going hunting, going fishing, gathering, weaving, whatever that village, that life, that being in life, whatever aspect of that is for an individual is enough. That is life. We are living. We are a part of this earth and a part of this dance. But there needs to be a tether to something, to the boss. There needs to be a tether to the bosses, depending on your tradition. We know in Christianity, we know who the boss is. Actually, I'm not even perfectly clear, because I know there's Christ, and I know there's God, and I think I've heard that God and Christ are the same. Anyways, and there's no other gods, or if they're all false idols or whatever. But speaking about, there's rules here. Don't speak about someone else's tradition, because you don't know. I've been invited into a culture that is not mine. What is my culture? I don't know. I'm white. I'm a settler. My lineage is European. I have Scottish, English, German, Irish, Scandinavian. Those are primarily, where that lineage comes from, where my lineage is. The history of tradition, no tradition, completely cut off. I'm a spiritual orphan as far as I'm concerned. Many people, they've gravitated to Christianity, and I do have a certain point of view about religion, Christianity, like Christ consciousness, and not just Christ consciousness, but the Spirit of Christ. This isn't something to take lightly, and I'm not going to get into that now, but there's value in all of these religions and the spiritual level. And the text, like Northrop Frye spoke about, the incommunicable, if you understand, to not take things literally, and to, this is another teaching that came from a ceremony with a Blackfoot elder. We're floating, and I can't remember, I don't recall if it's a Blackfoot teaching, which is why I'm qualifying it. But we're floating down the river, and we're not meant to be swimming for the shore. We're not meant to be, grabbing for the branches that are hanging down or the dirt underneath our fingernails. We're meant to be going with the flow and looking around, looking from left to right and seeing who's with us. Those are our allies. Those are our people. And we see others on the shore fighting, trying to get up, slipping, falling, struggling. That resistance, that text, we have to be careful with the text. And it's interesting because I know that it can give us, a text or something tangible, whether it's the text of Carl Jung, or the text of the Bible, which version of the Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, different versions. I once heard that the writings, that the Bible that Moses received was those were the words of God, and apparently that text doesn't exist anymore. But this isn't something I know a whole lot about. But I do want to explore that. I'd like to unearth that in this podcast, and put that text and judging people who are doing it differently in different ways, different spiritual ways. Like those spiritual traditions, they evolved. I'll speak specifically about the indigenous traditions. They evolved fundamentally with a collaboration between, from the land and the spirit of the land. So there's I was going to say like a combination or co-creation of spirit and the land, but it's not even, it's like one and the same in a way, because the spirits of that land are unique, and the expression of that land is the expression of the spirit of the land, and so narratives form, and the narratives that each tradition weaves, they are they're like the I don't know, we ingest them, we bring them into our mind, and they get filtered, and they get us closer to that truth. That's what I see. And so we have to be careful when we question other people. And so these teachings, there's they connect to the village. They connect to our living a good life in the self-actualization. What is the work we're doing for our own well-being, and then how do we bring that back to our people, and do they need it? How much is life teaching them, and what's the best way to teach somebody? And if you're older, like I'm 50, my boy is 19 now, and that's a real test. Holy, because there's such a strong instinct for me to continue to father him, and yet the insights that I've had is, let him learn now. I need to take a step back and let him come to me when he's having a hard time, and let him, if there's a teaching, let's say that it's in a house, I don't go in the house first, and like a real estate agent, start showing him all the different aspects of the teaching. I let him go in the house first. You go in the house. That's up to you. And if he doesn't step in the house, that's the thing, right? Is like I want him to step in the house, because I don't want him to suffer. I want him to to be able to have a good life, and to be able to have integrity, and to find a good partner, and to have good things happen for him. And I don't know what his karma is. I don't know what's really in his best interest. That's above my pay grade. I do not know what's in his best interest when it comes to his process of self-discovery, discovering self, and then discovering his relationship with spirit, with with the feedback of the world as external environment, and ultimately community. And so allowing him to go in that house on his own, and to take a step back, and just being very mindful around when to enter at all. That, again, that house being that metaphor for a particular level, a particular field of vibration for him to experience, and all the external manifestations of that, whether it's a relationship for the first time, or struggling to get to work on time, or the trinity of porn and pot and PlayStation, or all video games and screens, but specifically video games. It's like the Bermuda Triangle. Like you get caught there, and some people you're never seen again, or at least for years and years and years, and it's very painful to see, for me, seeing my son even kind of toy with that. It's very difficult, because I know how seductive it is, For me, it was never video games. That was never a part of it, and it wasn't pot. There was pornography. That's something that I fell into for a period of time, and it was a vice. Like it was a field of resonance, like of of self-medicating, and and it was. And when I realized it was time to quit, which was like it took a few times. It wasn't, it would be cold turkey in a way, or no, it wasn't cold turkey. It was just like rules, like setting up limitations and then slowly backing out, and eventually became quitting for good, and falling back in, being single at the time and falling back into it. Like, why not? Being the questions of, just one more time, or just from time to time or whatever. But that, what happens in the brain, it's like cocaine. When the closer you are in time, speaking time wise, like to that experience, the stronger the seduction is. And so then, with alcohol being another one, and drugs, and these are very very powerful fields that can take our body, our physiology, to somewhere else and give us immediate pleasure and allow us to escape from one thing or another. I mean, it's always going to be emotion at the end of the day. That feeling world, and not wanting to be with what is in whatever moment, whatever feelings coming up in whatever moment. And it's tricky stuff. And so, yeah, being a father and seeing that, and having been through aspects of that, and the Bermuda Triangle, knowing how intense that is, like, holy. And then all the anxiety that's rampant right now, and that for kids that age and younger and older, like, there's so many tests. And these dark paths, like these dark spirits, they do become teachers. Like, they are very fringe light workers. And it's true, because you see the dark and the light, and the dark needs light to transmute, to transform, in the act of bringing light to something that's filled with darkness. And I mean darkness as in sin and trauma and anger, and inappropriate anger. Anger is another whole field there that we'll delve. But these darker aspects of being, many dissociative, like troubled and Machiavellian or conniving or narcissistic, like these descriptors of these states of being. Like, yeah, if you don't want to go close to them if you're not equipped, but as we as individuals, as we get a little bit higher on our spiritual path and our soul's path of integrating the light of creation, the light of God. I said the G word. I just did it, and I feel kind of self-conscious doing it because it's such a loaded word. So many connotations for me. Same with prayer. Like, how the hell did Christianity get the full copyright on prayer? Like, that was my experience growing up. And then you open the door to all these different teachings and traditions. It's like, no, prayer is not, you can't copyright that. Anyways, yeah, it's just, the darkness has the potential, all darkness has the potential to be transmuted. We nurture our infants, and, we nurture the people as they're crossing over. We nurture the sickly, and we nurture the troubled, when we are equipped to do so. Yeah, it's a real test, of mindfulness and attention to what our capacity is, and but that energy, that of transmutation of one being, bringing light to another, again, whether it's an infant or whether it's somebody, who's narcissistic and, has left, whether it's the devil incarnate, if you have the capacity, the transmutation of that dark energy is, that's a part of it all. That's a part of the meaning of it all. I mean, right now, me even saying that is sort of like definitely speaking above my pay grade, like in terms of starting the meaning of it all. Like that's not my mind to say, but that seems to be the case as far as I'm concerned. That transmutation and of helping, being of service, and and the spiritual valley, the valley of the spiritual traditions of all the New Age, the Eastern, the Indigenous, the religious, all of these different, in some cases institutions, in other cases fields of knowing, in other cases like mythological constructs. Like, I guess they're all mythological constructs, though, at the end of the day, in the sense, in terms of that communication of, what defines a Shipibo person, and again, or a Lakota person, and again, as a white man, I have to be pretty connected to my heart in order to not be deceived by someone else's interpretation of what that means. And I'm not naive. I don't consider myself to be an Indigenous person or a Shipibo person, because or a Lakota person, because there's a lineage aspect, but there's a spiritual aspect too. And that's between me and God, and me and my, the light workers, the unseen, the ancestors, and cultivating, helping me do what is. I mean, I didn't choose who came to me. I didn't choose how this is, to my mind, predetermined to play out. And so, it's that self-expression of releasing, as much of my light, of my soul, as a human being on this planet during this lifetime, this mortal lifetime. And so, but I mean, again, mindfulness, you don't want to get in over your head. There will be there's people out there who, in these different traditions, that are walking with a bit of an edge, and they can, some of them have a lot of influence, some of them have a lot of medicine, that some of them have a strong prayer and community behind them. So this energy, can become quite powerful. And if you trip them up, which I have, and I will get into that too at some point. But again, I do have to be careful, because I've made mistakes, but the truth is that they were meant to happen, and I was meant to learn from them. And there was humility, a connection to God, that source of light, that vibration, that field opening as I grieved, as I felt, very painful feelings of ostracism or just abandonment, that abandonment wound, that imprint of never being seen, about people looking at me and seeing, the 30 or 40, white guys on this path before me, and putting all of them and the experiences and the behaviors, that were seen and viewed and experienced, putting all those as a projection onto me, and not being curious about who I am. Like, that's the story of my life. That's my imprint, right from birth, from my parents, unable to see me, and not being particularly curious about who I was on a deeper level and who I am. I mean, who I am, that's shifted, because I've found other ways of manifesting that, and the adversity through not being seen, and the pain, and the trials and tribulations around that have all been medicine for who I had a deep desire to be. What I really wanted out of this life, what I wanted to, experience, and, the capacity at which, I wanted to be able to be, to shine, for lack of a better word. And, and that light gets dim sometimes and it gets brighter sometimes, but as I continue on my ceremony path, on my spiritual path of continuing to go into the discomfort and the uncomfortable ways of, this human Mark A. Lewis, the different aspects of that are, that have darkness, and whether that's fear or, still some lingering hurt and frustration and anger and, not feeling safe around particular people. There's so many things that different people convey, that different, in order to express who they are, and then those initial reads, the initial interpretation, they go deeper in time, and they shift. So, it's a bit of a quantum soup. Yeah, so here we are. How do we create a sacred village, and how do we do that? How do we do that work for ourselves and stay on track that way, and finding that tether? What's important? The words that we say, they have a certain amount of value. The actions, what we do in our life, obviously, has a value that goes beyond words, and just keeping track of that, and I really want that tether. I want to know, as I'm expressing these ideas and delving into different concepts, that if it gets a little bit too ethereal and ultimately meaningless to our passage here in this life, then I'm gonna have some fun sometimes too, and just kind of go out there into the the limitless aspects of the spiritual cosmos, but I want to come back. I want to come back to my heart. I want to come back to the Hema, my village, my body, and the and then that outer reflection of that, of the health of that broader village and community, and what we can call in and really get into in this podcast, how we can do that, how we can take something from conceptual to being a reality, and still hanging on to, I don't want to say an ideology, because it's not, it's a feeling. It's like the sacred, that village, that space of knowing of Charles Eisenstein. I'm a fan of his work, and listen or read one of his articles from time to time. I like to see what he's up to, what he's thinking about certain current events. And many people that are listening to this podcast, if you knew that there was a spiritual connection to this, and you'll probably know who he is. And yeah, very, very definitely worth checking out, and a lot of wisdom there. But the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I like that. There is, something about striving that's important, and but also fundamentally learning that the sacred and the divine do exist, and whether that's a learning, whether that's a cognitive response, like an idea, like whatever it takes for people, particularly the adults and the elders of the village, to embody that, and first experience that, and connect to that, and return to that, and return to that, and return to that. It's not something you go to university for, and then you tuck up or you put up on your wall with a diploma. I connected to the sacred. I don't think that's the way. Like, it's that returning, whatever that practice is that helps you return to that, and embodying that and passing that on. And again, you teach somebody young that there's something sacred by just telling them that's not really going to land. Storytelling, there's definitely something there. The wisdom of fairy tales and indigenous stories and folk tales, and these teachings that have these hidden messages and this like currency of just like wisdom that can be communicated to younger generations. Like that's a really good way to start, and embodying it, like living it. The way you teach, the way an elder or an adult talks, a real adult. Somebody who's been initiated. I mean, that's what I mean by that, and we'll get into that too. But the way that a person who's been initiated into life, into a way of being that helps them connect to, and it's not just one initiation. Don't be fooled. Now I'm getting didactic and a bit preachy. Sorry, but this is something that I feel a little bit of charge. I'm not feeling the charge right now, but I'm connecting to it. Like there is a little bit there of seeing people's, like white people in particular, like or let's say colonized people, educated people who are a part of the society, like the amount of arrogance, and I don't mean that, and it's not like arrogance as in you're a bad person, but it's in denial. There's like a lot of arrogance that we need to cut through that are blockages to feeling, that deeper wisdom, that sacred connection that really brings us to our knees and reminds us of what's real, what's true, and who's boss. And with that, I'm going to sign off. Mark A. Lewis, Sacred Village Podcast. Over and out. I lay my head down. Check out my lovely partner's music, Christina Jessen, at christinajessen.com. And there's also more information on what we're doing. We're doing a land project up here, traditional land development with a community intention. And if you're interested in any of the retreats that we're a part of and part of organizing, you can find all that information at sacredvillagepodcast.com. Have a wonderful day. Floating down and down like a feather, I floated down and down, and I floated down and down like a feather.